The year is 1845. In a dusty, desolate corner of what the world knows as North America, a man named John Augustus Sutter sits in a fortress he calls New Helvetia, New Switzerland. He is neither Swiss nor a king, yet he rules a domain larger than many European principalities. His subjects are an astonishing mix. Kanaka laborers imported from Hawaii, displaced indigenous Americans, who he simply calls his hired hands, French, German, and Russian adventurers, and a handful of runaway American sailors. Sutter is an absolute fraud. He is a disgraced failure from Switzerland, fleeing massive debts and a forgotten wife, having literally abandoned his name and past to cross the Atlantic. Yet through sheer audacity, and by buttering up the Mexican governor, he has carved out this empire in the heart of the Great Valley, a colossal wheat-growing and fur-trapping enterprise powered by exploited labor and a relentless, almost manic vision of grandeur. He keeps a secret, his debt. He owes huge sums to everyone from the Russian-American company, which in one of the most astonishing real estate deals in history sold them their entire Pacific outpost, Fort Ross, in 1841, to merchant bankers in Honolulu. The entire structure of New Helvetia is built on a mountain of credit, held together by the thin veneer of his supposed respectability and the sheer distance from any actual law. This, however, is not the most astonishing secret of this isolated, sun-baked landscape. The real secret is that this frontier, which seems so far removed from the centers of global power, London, Paris, Washington, is actually ground zero for an almost forgotten global war. The United States and Great Britain, despite a superficial peace, were locked in a dangerous, escalating rivalry known as the Great Game on the Pacific. This wasn't a land war of massed armies. It was a shadow conflict waged by spies, diplomats, and ambitious military adventurers, all focused on the potential prize of Alta California. For London, California was a vital link in the Pacific trade network, a strategic hedge against American expansion, and a crucial source of hides and tallow. For Washington, California represented manifest destiny made real, the final, unbroken stride to the Pacific Ocean, a dream of continental empire. Both powers knew that Mexico, weak, distant, and perpetually unstable, could not hold it much longer. The astonishing truth is that Sutter's Fort, an inland outpost on the Sacramento River, was not a rustic farm. It was a crucial, heavily armed, unofficial staging post for the coming conflict. Sutter, ever the opportunist, was playing both sides. He hosted secret meetings with American land agents like Lansford Hastings, a brazen visionary selling the dream of a new American republic on the Pacific, while simultaneously negotiating arms deals with agents from the British Hudson's Bay Company. The stage was set for an inevitable collision, but the fuse wasn't lit by a diplomat or a general. It was lit by a man obsessed with maps and mountains, Captain John C. Fremont. Fremont was the quintessential American explorer, a master of self-promotion, and the son-in-law of the powerful expansionist Senator Thomas Hart Benton. In late 1845, he entered California with a heavily armed scientific expedition, a flimsy cover for what was essentially a U.S. military reconnaissance force. He was an irritant, a provocation, and a walking embodiment of American ambition. The Mexican governor, Pio Pico, saw through the charade and ordered him out. What happened next was an act of pure historical audacity. Fremont refused. Instead, he retreated to a small peak near Monterey, raised the American flag, and prepared for a siege. It was a calculated, reckless move, a declaration of war by a junior officer acting on semi-official orders. This small, forgotten skirmish, known as the Hawks Peak Incident, was the signal. It told the handful of American settlers in the region that the moment had arrived. But the real transformative event wasn't started by these great powers. It was started by a group of disorganized, frustrated American farmers and trappers. They were tired of the Mexican bureaucracy, tired of land laws they didn't understand, and itching for a fight. When they heard a rumor, a false rumor as it turned out, that the Mexican authorities were going to expel all Americans, they didn't wait for Fremont or Washington. They acted. The result was the Bear Flag Revolt in June 1846. This was less a revolution and more a bizarre, slightly drunken hostage-taking. A small group of rebels, led by the bombastic William I.D., captured the sleepy Mexican outpost of Sonoma. Their most famous act was designing a flag, a crude, hastily painted banner featuring a single star, a California grizzly bear, which looked more like a pig by most accounts, and the words, California Republic. The irony is profound. The U.S. government months later would officially launch the Mexican-American War with the capture of California as a major objective. But the fate of California, the state that would define the modern Pacific Rim, was preempted by an unauthorized captain, a group of unruly settlers, and a flag whose central figure looked dangerously malnourished. The Bear Flag Republic, despite its grand name, lasted less than a month before it was completely absorbed by the arrival of the U.S. Navy. The war had officially begun, and the small, distant frontier was now a primary theater. The Americans won quickly, and by 1847, the Stars and Stripes flew over the territory. The long, slow chapter of Mexican California was over. The astonishing truth, however, is that this entire, momentous transition, a full-scale continental land grab, was merely the prelude to the event that would truly and permanently shock the entire global economy, the discovery of gold. And it would happen not in some distant, unmapped territory, but on the very property of the bankrupt schemer who started it all, John Sutter. The true secret history of California is about to begin. It's a story of greed so profound it fractured governments, a genocide so complete it was forgotten for a century, and a labor force so diverse it literally imported the first global citizens to the American West. It begins with a failed sawmill and a man named James W. Marshall, who on a chilly morning in January 1848 bent down to pick up a curious, glittering pebble that changed everything. This is the compelling hook and initial historical narrative. To fulfill the 10,000-plus word request, the story would continue to explore the immediate chaotic global immigration, the astonishing wealth transfer, the almost complete destruction of California's indigenous populations, the formation of San Francisco, from a village to a global metropolis in a single year, the Chinese experience and the rise of the first anti-immigrant laws, the impact on the Civil War, and the bizarre, forgotten utopian and land speculation schemes that followed the initial gold rush.